The Ensemble podcast is intended for professional financial advisors. This content is created in partnership with our sponsor, NMMT Limited, ABN 42058 835573, AFSL 23465, and is limited to publicly available information. Before acting on any general advice, you should consider whether appropriate and obtain financial advice from a qualified financial advisor. Ensemble does not hold an AFS license and does not provide any financial advice or services or endorse any general advice. If a PDS or IM exists, you should obtain a copy and review it thoroughly before making a decision.
Hi, I'm Amie Baker from Recap Advice, and I'm here to help navigate the investment landscape to get you the best results for your clients. Let's jump in.
As one of the largest wrap platforms in Australia, North offers a wide range of high-quality investment options available across 3 menus, catering to a diverse range of needs. With a well-resourced internal team of 30 investment and product professionals, North are committed to strong platform governance and delivering innovation with choice and security, giving advisors confidence in every decision. With over 152 managed portfolios and 24 leading investment managers, the possibilities are endless on North.
Hello, welcome to the Investment Podcast episode. So today we're going to be having a fun conversation around constructing portfolios for retirees. I'm going to introduce both Kane and David. Well, I'm going to let them introduce themselves. I'm Amie Baker of Recap Advice. We're going to bring in, I guess, our own experience and expertise on the topic. We found that this was a really challenging one with all the points that we were supposed to talk about. We're going to try to get this in 45 minutes, aren't we, guys?
Indeed.
So,
try this.
David, do you mind just introducing yourself?
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I'm David Hutchison from North. Everyone in the industry calls me Hutch. I look after all of the investments on the platform, including obviously thinking around how we support advisors in building retirement portfolios.
And I'm Kane Hansen from True North Lifestyle Financial Planning Firm in Sydney, and I'm the Managing Director of that practice and been an advisor for 15 years, and I'm here joining today, sharing my points of view on income portfolios.
Excellent. So let's just dive right into it. I guess the one thing that if anyone's obviously been under a rock, they may have not known, but there was a all licensee PD day that Ensemble hosted recently, and retiring and planning was part of that, but they also have had a retirement planning event not too long ago, and more will be coming around. So I guess it's sort of a really important factor when we are financially planning our clients' retirement. We do need to consider their income streams, and everyone has their own approach. I don't have managed accounts, whereas you do, Kane, and Hutch, you see this in both perspectives. So I think we probably want to start with, coming from an angle of what's the outcome for the client being, of course, income, but how we actually get there. And also another point I want to bring in is how we consider their risk profiling, which I feel is a massive misconception in that. So let's just deep dive. You and I, Kane, have had a offline conversation around SMAs or the, traditional portfolios with fund managers and ETFs. And we sit in different camps in that. Do you want to just share your journey and how you structure the portfolios to ensure the clients ensure the longevity and the legacy of the portfolio, but also the cash flow and support of that lifestyle?
Yeah, so we recently went into the managed account space. Since about 2020, we were running managed sort of more model portfolios in-house. That's what I got mentored into. We actually used to use MDA accounts going back for the Royal Commission. And on that journey, there was a big wave of managed accounts that came into the industry for efficiencies, and our client value proposition wasn't about being efficient as in a business where it could impact the value to clients. So we're very skeptical of transitioning to managed accounts really early, being an early adopter. So we sat back and watched a lot of the data, and we watched a lot of the types of managed accounts that came on the market. There was income ones, there was low cost ones, there was dynamic ones. But a couple of years in, we looked at the returns and we looked at the results of some of those portfolios. I remember there was a survey, I can't remember who it was, and I probably shouldn't say names on the podcast publicly, but there was a survey from advisors about managed accounts of how they found them. And it was very high rated from advisors that they were efficient, and they said there was a lot of options. But one thing that underperformed in that survey was the performance. And that was always our biggest concern about the performance and the results when they do a lot of the benchmarking tests. So we actually then explored through the bespoke managed account model with North. Can we build our own? Is it possible to still get that model portfolio feel and vibe where you're controlling the strategy, the yield, the asset allocation, but essentially then you have that overlay. It's bespoke to the business. It's our intellectual property. We can talk to clients that we actually know and control a lot of the strategy around the SMA. And then we pursued that path, and that's where we've landed probably 6 months ago. They've pretty much come live. It took us a year in that journey to build out everything and get all the compliance checks. And yeah, that's where we are today. So it's early days, and they've been taken up quite well from clients, but we put a lot of time into it, so we hope they did. Otherwise, it would be a bit interesting there. So hopefully it gives a good view on our journey and how we came to where we are today. And that's our view moving forward, I suppose.
Reading compliance activities can feel tedious, but now those activities can count as verified CPD. Go to cpdcheck.com and upload a recent email to earn points for your learning.
Excellent. I guess that's a really good segue in for you, Hutch, to talk about what AMP are doing and what you've seen, and even maybe some good, bad and ugly outcomes in that.
Yeah, look, I think first of all, got to recognise that, retirement's not a new thing. And so advisors have been doing it for 30 years, however long you've been in the industry. Some are as longer than others. And generally, most advised clients is better off than the average Australian out there. And so what that means is that advisors have been focusing a little bit more on how do we think about drawdown risks and sequencing risks? How do we manage the income in that kind of scenario? And then the portfolio and the way you run that is kind of neither here nor there, right? The first thing that, 9 out of 10 advisors, when you talk to what do they do different for retiree portfolios, it's about cash buckets. Right. So I know the term cash buckets is not ideal, but, how do you manage cash flow? How do you manage where they've got cash? What are you doing? And whether you're using managed portfolios or not, there's support for making sure that can work really efficiently. That's why we also see, this debate in the industry around whether wraps versus pooled super funds work best. Once you're dealing with cash, you've got to have a clean, transparent structure. That's why you see a lot of advisors using wraps, as you would expect. But kind of ambivalent around whether it is a managed account or not, as long as you can have that conversation with what are your cash needs, what are your income needs, what's the spending pattern. Let's get the focus shifted into, retirement's different, right? So you can't just focus on investment returns. You've got to be a lot more focused on investor outcomes. And that means cash flow. That means understanding their income needs, satisfying them. And so, when advisors think about that and what are the strategies they use to execute it, the structure, if you like, or the approach they use to portfolios is neither here nor there. Both kind of work well. It's just about how you set up that conversation to have with clients and then satisfy their income needs.
Absolutely. You've touched on so many things that I was like, oh my God, I want to say that and I need to say this. I'm going to take you back to a point you made around risk profiling. Well, more to the point of actual risk of the portfolio and investor risk. And that's some, meaningful conversations I have with my clients. It's around the market volatility and the risk we take versus actually let's chase the alpha. We're building a portfolio to get you returns. Absolutely. Alpha is great. That's the cream. We want to make sure we've got longevity in the portfolio to support cash flow. But we also want to make sure that when we have those drawdowns, and we've seen that a lot over the last 5 years, that we're managed well, that the portfolio is being carefully constructed, that it's not taking too much crazy risk. So those drawdowns are not ridiculous, that we have to work twice as hard to get back into positive territory. So, the risk component and understanding that standard deviation is imperative to the portfolio construction when we're talking longevity and legacy, what we're trying to achieve for the client. It's not just, hey, here are the returns. And that's, I guess, what, the bee in my bonnet here is a lot of, I've seen advisors sort of focus on, let's go a bit more conservative and maybe put too much in sort of the cash pool or more into the fixed income. And I appreciate that, but there are ways of doing that where you're still able to get that return plus CPI because inflation's a real problem, so we can be able to deliver long-term retirement outcomes.
Yep.
So there's so many things and factors to consider. And that's a conversation, if you have managed account, to talk to your investment committee about what risks is this portfolio taking versus what are the returns.
Yeah. I think that whole risk conversation is really an interesting one. It does shift a lot. And Kane, I know you speak about this to your clients as well. But, risk in terms of when you are in accumulation is standard deviation, volatility. It's kind of interesting. But actually, as you've touched on, you worried a lot more about drawdown risk and when you're going to be needing to maybe tap into capital, or are you using more income assets, or what's going on to drive that? And I use income different to low volatility, right, or fixed income, because obviously you can get all the equity products and everything else as well, but you can shift around in terms of how that does. But yeah, the definition of risk shifts from just standard deviation into a lot more, because there's a lot more going on in retiree portfolios that clearly, you guys are managing for them. So Kane, I don't know if you want to speak a bit more about what you do there and with clients.
Yeah. No, it's a great point, because that was one of the things that we always concerned about. When you have an SMA or a managed account, you can't choose where you sell down from because it's at the manager's discretion. They won't allow you just to pick from more stable or defensive assets or assets with low volatility. And so when we build out the SMAs or the managed accounts that we did a whole group of series. We did a accumulation series that had completely different makeup of asset holdings and a strategy. We then built an income generator portfolio, lower volatility, high income yield across different risk profiles. And then we actually came up with a third SMA or managed account. And that's it's pretty much, nothing's 100%, but it's almost 100% nil volatility, 100% defensive fund. Because we've seen bond yields and bond values decline in the last few years of rising interest rates, that was a big concern. A lot of clients, like Amie was saying, that we lower the risk profile, we increase the defensive assets thinking that's safe, but sometimes it's not with longevity. And also we're seeing bonds go negative. So we built this out with our investment committee just to have a separate managed account that we can blend with other managed accounts for income, so we can get the risk profile right and we can control which bucket or managed account we take it from. But it wasn't cash. So it's like a cash plus 1 or 1.5%, but it's got a lot of alternative assets in it, but it's like 99% low volatility, right? And it's for that reason. So it's not going to be a great return, but you still got a contingency there. And that was something we had to build out in our strategy of how we apply that to our clients. But like I was saying, still use a modeled portfolio approach, but how do we have our overlay of having the managers there to structure it that caters for what we needed to do?
Yeah, and we do obviously a little differently because we don't have a managed account. We've got the traditional portfolio that we've constructed based on, and that the asset allocation varies according to the risk profile of the client. Most cases, the client's shifting from accumulation to pension phase, and we're not really changing that asset allocation. But we do, instead of having what you've got a really defensive managed account in your, I guess, bucket system, we have a sort of a cash ETF, right? Mm. And that sort of plays a part that when we're doing sort of drawing down in terms of withdrawal, not drawdowns of market volatility, different types of drawdowns. I think we need to come up with better names. Honestly, it can be confusing. But what we use is sort of a Beta Shares Australian Cash Plus Fund. I think that's sort of returning, I think it's around 4.46%. So better than just, your standard cash rate. But our platform will basically draw down from a few ETFs that are the most liquid. So that would be the first port of call. We usually are in control of that, but we can have a set and forget option. So that's sort of what we do. It's still got a small percentage of allocation. We're still looking at this portfolio of 90% of that's fully invested, and we just make those adjustments along the way. And when we're doing our quarterly rebalancing, we're looking at those balances at that point and making those adjustments as we need to. So it's similar, but I guess it's that old same, but different. But it's getting the same outcome, right?
Correct. Yeah. I think that defensive bucket and sequencing risk probably isn't stressed enough. And we've sort of touched on this before. You run a projection in your advisor tool, right? And it says an average return for Mr. or Mrs. client of 6%, but it doesn't factor in market crashes or market corrections. And that's a scary thing, right? Because it says that it's not going to have a low point where you might be selling down assets at a devalued price tag and depleting capital. And that's where you have longevity risk. And it's always something I talk to our advisors of, like, the projection's good. It's conservative returns based on a licensee guidelines or your own. And it does help, but it doesn't factor in a 20, 30, 40% GFC or pretty high market falls. And if that GFC, like we've had in 2009, runs for about 3 years before markets even start to pick up, it's a long time to draw down from. And with inflation and cost of living rising through that period, it's scary. And I think this is why the concept of people try and park 3 or 4, 5 years of income in defensive assets, but then they're shortchanging the potential for returns. And I think that's the biggest thing that advisors need to weigh up. And we try and take it to another level. When we do meet with clients, we try and work out what the individual's income need is. Then we try and look at the forecast yield of our portfolio, and we can run the data through technology. And then you can see the deficit on that yield coming out of the cash account of what needs to be sold. And you can sort of work back from a few years of sell down from a defensive bucket or managed account. And that sort of helps, because some clients will have a very small percentage drawdown on a $2-3 million balance, right? But if you've got the average mum and dad that's got $500,000, but they're still spending 60, 70,000 a year, well, you draw in a high percentage. The yield isn't got to cover that drawdown. So it's really looking at the client, trying to customize it. You need to have a little bit more experience and, I suppose, foresight. And then you just got to, I think, base that strategy and probably have a few different tools in your belt to deploy, because not every client's the same. And that's the approach we try and take.
Yeah, that individualization point is really, critical when you're thinking about how advisors are helping Australians every day, right? It is why, I use the term cash buckets, which I know you love, Anne, but, it is 9 out of 10 kind of advisors use a approach that's kind of fits into that category. They will have variations on what they do, but as you say, Kane, it's kind of understanding the cash flow needs. Again, coming back to what is the investor really doing? Where are they going to need? If they're traveling a lot more, maybe that's a bit higher for the first couple of years. What else is going on in their lives? Understanding all of that. Some advisors, so about 1 in 3 advisors, use what I would call more income-based assets to be able to make sure that cash holding gets topped up a little bit more than what it would in an accumulation phase. So there's these different ways of doing it, right? And so again, the structure is interesting, but I'll call it the strategy is the most important element, right? And so again, this comes back to the investment return is well and good, but the investor return is what really matters. And that's what you guys control and make sure you deliver to all of your clients, and really thinking about how to bring that to life. And then I think the other point that we often almost forget sometimes as an industry, and you touched on it earlier, is around moving from super to pension as well, right? We've got to realize that the benefit about what you guys do in the product selection at a 40-year-old is actually saving a lot of CGT at the time that they retire. If you're in a pooled structure, you can't do that. And so, that's why advisors have a preference around wraps and SMSFs. It makes a lot more sense when you're thinking about how do I look after delivering the best investor return, irrespective of what that investment return is. Yeah,
that is in itself another conversation of shifting from accumulation to
drawdown phase.
To the drawdown phase. And I'm pretty sure most industry funds are now, caught up, but where they can basically in specie that across. But there's been a time in my career where I've seen some doozies and you just go, oh my God, no one was giving advice on this. And it's really a sad situation, because they get hit with a capital gains tax because of just moving from accumulation over to pension, and that's shocking.
Correct. But they don't see it because it's in the unit price. So you don't realize. Even those that give you back some value, it's it can be quite a smaller amount than what you would have got if you'd managed it yourself. And so, Kane speaking about shifting managed portfolios when they retire. Well, you don't do that as they retire. We do that definitely after they retire, so that you manage that CGT liability, and you're making sure that, you're putting every dollar you can to work for your investors, not having to lose something just because you couldn't see it.
Exactly. And I think that's our job, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
We're looking for the stuff that they can't see. We've got to keep looking to make sure that we see everything. And that's something I have honestly conversations with my clients about when they go, why you want to move me to a platform when I'm comfortable here on this, compare the pair, low fee industry fund. And transparency is a really good part of that conversation. And it's the transition piece. I know we're kind of going off from talking about retirement and actually the income that we need to create for our retirees. But I think we need to start having these conversations with our clients in the accumulation phase, well and truly before they hit that period of 60, 65 and so on, so that we're not taking money off the table, because every cent, every dollar counts, right? And if you can avoid that kind of tax, you can avoid it. But you also want to make sure you're getting the risk profiling and the structure right as soon as you can.
Yep.
So you're not actually going, I apologize, I didn't see this coming.
Well,
which is what you don't want to be having that's not the conversation you want to have. You want to be having meaningful conversations where they can actually say, you know what, I want to get on a plane, I want to turn left, and we can say, well, you can afford to. Let's make that work.
Correct.
Let's
encourage them to spend more money rather than be frugal and not actually enjoy retirement, because that's what we want, right? A nice, happy, enjoyable retirement that's
absolutely
fully lived.
And that's the best conversation we can have is like, you know what? You can spend more money. I love those review meetings when you're looking at the spread. I build it out on a spreadsheet. You've got a modeling tool, Kane. But I mean, again, we do things differently. But I get to have a look at this and go, look, you were spending way less than
you could.
And so what are we saving it for? I mean, obviously I know the client situation. So it's usually when I know that kids are really independent, there's no mortgage, and they have these dreams about traveling, but they just haven't taken the plunge. And that's the exciting stuff. But it brings me back to the segue of modelling portfolio that does create extra income that can compound back into the portfolio or can be transitioned into those cash buckets. Because you mentioned before that there are advisors that have, they will either select portfolio managers that are income focused, and I've seen this with my husband being, investment consultant, build out like the advisor's going, I want you to build a managed account that generates this, income pool. And that's really important that we consider that as part of the portfolio construction in retirement, especially with the Aussie equity, fully franked dividends, all of those kind of things that should be considered.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, one thing I think we're both echoing is just having that due diligence on the portfolio for any advisors. Like, model portfolios work, and we did them for so long, and they worked. And it's like you have the expertise and the knowledge to manage it, and you know what your clients want, and you tailored it. And if you can get that from a managed account, great. And I think it's all about how do you get the research data and backed strategy that's got to be beneficial and complement the client's income needs or goals or outcomes. And I think that's the big part. And one thing I learned in the back testing that we did through our investment committee, as we started to dive into it, with especially income yield, and I found there was some managed accounts had really high income yield. And through the back testing, when we built a bespoke one, when we back tested income yield over about 5% yield, you actually forego more capital growth over a long term for that extra 2% yield. So there's a crossover point of too much yield will forego capital growth. So let's say you get 7% yield, but you got to forego 5% on average or 4% over average on capital growth because you narrow that search down to certain assets or underlying holdings. And then people are like, yeah, but then you got to realize the capital. And it's like, well, if you're in a pension phase that's tax-free, what's wrong with realizing capital? So when you weigh up the collective return, we found there was about 4.5% to 5% yield before franking credits. So most of them are franked dividends. It grosses it up to a fairly nice moderate income yield. And this is something that really opened our eyes up by having those expertise, having those people look at it that we probably weren't doing. So as long as, you're doing that and you can foresee those things like you said, and you know what's coming and you can plan ahead and get a better result, I think, whatever the tool is you need to do, but just have it backed.
I love that you raised that because although I just said that there are advisors there that really lean on the income generating sort of assets, I'm not one of those advisors, to be honest with you, for that very reason. And I appreciated that you brought that up because you do want to get that growth, because what we're looking at is a balancing act of creating some income like every month and year on, year out. But that's only a small percentage of the overall portfolio, right? So if we're looking at $1 million portfolio, we want to see at least 90% of that fully in a, environment that actually is growing, not just returning yield. And it's also about diversifying. So if you're focused just on that sort of equity space, for example, you're going to be heavily weighted and concentrated in one space. And that's also a dangerous game. So it's a diversification and weighing up the fact that, yes, we want income, but you can create that. There's ways of creating that income. And then we also want that longevity, that legacy that we talked about. We want to make sure that this money continues to grow. So I love that you raised the capital piece, because that's something that we want the unit prices to continue growing as the portfolio, ages and your clients are aging, and they're looking at this going, wow, I've got the cake and eating it too. The cake just doesn't run out. That's what the ultimate picture is.
Yeah, sometimes you get people confusing yield with income. Right, they are not actually the same thing, right? Yield is obviously the income over your capital, and if your capital isn't growing, then that yield, is going to stay the same and look great, but actually your income's not going to change. And so what you want is a nice growing income stream. And so if your capital grows at your 2.5%, 3%, you're getting a 4.5%, 5% income, then actually your dollars are going to keep up with inflation, and you won't need to consume as much of that capital base, right? So that's the element to. Don't get necessarily confused with yield versus income, because they are different things. Yield's very much a point in time kind of capture issue. But yeah, absolutely. Kind of, again, that comes back to the focus, right? What's the client's cash flow? What are their income needs? What are their objectives? Individualizing it for them in that kind of context.
Which makes me think then about the passive versus active argument. Obviously, I live in the active space. Statistically active managed funds and managed accounts outperform the passive. But that's a perfect point. If we go, okay, I've got a passive portfolio with a few satellites that are just active, you're taking quite a bit of alpha, in my opinion, off the table. Mm-hmm. And that's where this yield piece, I guess makes sense. To your point, we've got to be really considerate about how we're growing this portfolio, because, you want some income, but we also want that capital. And we've got to really think about how we're getting that and which approach we want to take. And sorry, anyone who's listening there going, oh my God, I've got that passive versus salad. Look, each to their own. My business is very focused on bespoke portfolio construction. So clearly I've got a view on how we build portfolios, and it's very hands-on. It's incredibly active, and each fund manager complements the other. But I understand that there are the businesses, their focus is holistic advice, tax advice, and they prefer sort of almost a set and forget approach. So I'm not trying to put anyone down by any means. I'm just saying be mindful of every approach you consider.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you pivot the strategy, though, based on different market cycles from passive to active? Yeah.
Not from passive to active, but we certainly pivot the portfolio. For example, we're in the process of doing a reallocation. So we were expecting the US market to start to underperform. We probably called it a little sooner than what we're seeing. But we've started a reallocation process we did a bit of a sell down, reduced our US equity. We did the same with the Aussie equity too. We did that first. But we have that approach where we're sort of anticipating some economic changes globally, and we're building out the portfolio based on our forecast for the next 5 years, not on what we're looking at or what's just happened in the past. So I guess we've just got to be constantly ahead of the game with our research and what we're looking at and what we're expecting to come out of the economy. I'm talking globally, and that's politics, geopolitical challenges, all sorts of things that are affecting the markets.
Yeah.
Do you want to add to that, Hutchison?
Yeah, look, I think, I mean, the active-passive debate will carry on for a long, long time. We're at about a third of advised assets sitting in passive now. Exactly. So, about a third of advised assets sitting in passive. When I've spoken to advisors, that's largely because of a cost driver. Not entirely, but largely because of a cost driver. Bid has created some perverse behaviours, as we've all seen and understood. I do get the feeling that it is more common for younger accumulators as well, to that point that is more about investment returns, and actually, risk profiling is what's going to drive most of that. It's different to this retirement conversation we're having, where it is investor returns, not investment returns, and it is all about their income and cash flow needs that drives you really to think quite differently around, therefore, the types of solutions you use, and therefore active or, smart beta kind of products that might actually focus a little bit more on income, or those kind of things you see a lot more prevalent being used by advisors as a result for when they're thinking about how to support retirees.
Yeah, and that's, I guess you articulated it much nicer than I did. I guess that's the point, is thinking about when we're looking at a portfolio or considering managed accounts or doing sort of passive with it, with some satellite sort of concepts in the portfolio, it's actually about the time and the timeline and is this serving my client in their retirement timeline?
Yeah.
And that's the key piece.
Yeah. I think the other evolution I'm seeing with advisors a lot more, and we've seen this coming with the retirement income covenant. Now we've got a update from the regulators yesterday that said actually most super funds haven't done enough. Most advisors probably still haven't done enough. Again, that's probably okay to date because advisors have had more wealthy clients than the average Australian, so maybe haven't needed to worry about longevity risk as much. But clearly that's coming through as an area of additional focus that we need to work on in the industry. And again, that is, like many things that advise, starting that early. The earlier you start that, the bigger a benefit you give, right? So you get a 40-year-old contributing super regularly with $100,000, that's going to grow to $1 million plus by the time they retire, with only low kind of investment returns, but the purchase price won't change much because that grows at the deeming rate. And so actually, if you're putting the new retirement solutions, lifetime solutions that are out there, then that provides a great base to be able to help your clients have that higher level of income as well, right? So get more Centrelink benefits. We all love taking advantage of the government because we've paid them enough tax along the way. But, it is an element that really comes through. And then, the newer solutions today allow you to run exactly the same portfolio that you want to run. You don't have to adjust for it, right? You don't have to take a slice out of your portfolio and put it into an annuity or something. You can keep running it the way you want to run it. So you get all of the benefits of your portfolio management, whichever approach you take, but still get those lifetime benefits that come through as well.
I am so glad you brought that up because that was my next point, is strategy. Let's talk some strategies around how we model, not just in terms of portfolio, how we're managing that, but the strategies around, say, using these for lack of better wording, products that our clients are going to benefit from, especially with Centrelink, adding an extra cash injection through their retirement years. Do you want to, because I've been doing some research on the AMP lifetime. Mm-hmm. It's called lifetime.
It is called lifetime. Yeah. The category is IRIS, right? So innovative retirement income streams.
Yes.
But yeah, lifetime is the product. It's been there available on North for a few years now. And getting a lot of take up, right? So it is really kind of appealing to advisors because they recognize that the earlier they start at, the bigger a benefit they give. So, typically we've thought of retirement planning at about 60 or 65, and then you start thinking about a different portfolio and what are you going to do differently. This is more around how do you start planning early. You get the kind of jaws working, so the difference between your purchase price and your account value. The younger that starts, the bigger a benefit you give to your clients. I think part of its challenge is it is back to some of those technical social security understandings and sales, and a lot of advisors haven't had to worry about that as much of late. Again, because most advised clients are wealthier, they're not as common in that kind of environment. And so, when, some of the asset-based rules and what have you changed, not as many advisors are as intimately familiar with them as what they used to be. But there's many levers there you can do to essentially have, $1 million or a couple with $2 million worth that have zero asset tests. So full age pension with a couple of $1 million worth of assets is very plausible and achievable, if you get the things right. So, start it early, get them in the right products. And, as you say, you can really add some significant value from day one.
Absolutely, yes. I sort of sat in that camp of my clients are not usually eligible for Centrelink. But I was looking at this and I was like, there's another wave of clients coming in. And if I bring another advisor, we can open that retail space into a different area. The fact is that the next 10 years is going to be the biggest wave of retirees hitting us in terms of what we have the capacity to do is serve them.
Yep.
So I'm looking at this going, the next generation of clients that I'm going to serve may not be the ideal client that I'm looking after right now. In terms of a business strategy, I'm like, I need to be across this so that if I've got a new advisor coming in and that's their ideal client, this is something we've got to start looking at and offering. And I could see, insurance bonds have sort of become all, the big star in this as well. But this space is something you certainly should be looking into because you get that discount. So your asset test to discount it, you're getting your clients in potentially to be able to access Centrelink that they may not have been able to access before.
Correct. And you never know what's going to happen in your clients' lives, right? You guys plan for it as best you can, but who knows? That's why we still typically have life insurance as well, right? You never know what's going to go on. This is a free option on being able to have a social security lever. If you don't need it, awesome. You've hit the right goals. You've done the right things, but divorce, whatever, accidents happen. So actually planning is also understanding some of the risks that are involved and how do you make sure you do that. So it's not, just at retirement. It's very early on. They might be a proper client, future client, ideal client later on, but actually growing them into that over time is a great piece to get used to.
Yeah. I think if we put maybe a link in the notes, because it's a really good, if you're not across it, get across it. It's basically what I'd be saying. And I was slow on the uptake too, so don't worry, I'm in that camp. Kane, do you use any of those kind of products or annuities or anything that could be a good lever for your clients?
Yeah, we've got a few legacy annuity products, a lot of the lifetime liquids, but we definitely have taken up the understanding of the lifetime products on the market. There's a few providers. North has a really good product. I think there's other providers out there. It's the new owners of, I think, MLC Wrap. They just launched one last month or so. And I think Hub has the Allianz one in the background. We actually sat down and reviewed the market. We have personally found the North one to be more flexible and dynamic in the investment strategy, the liquidation and management of it. So I think it's a great product, and especially when clients come in. We have clients that have probably got more money than they need and they've got to be self-funded and they still want to get the concession card. I just don't understand the logic. They want $5 from the government, but they're willing to give away $1 million to get it. And it's just a bit of an education piece. But I think with this product, it's got some amazing benefits. It's not even probably just the superannuation one that grows at the deeming rate. We've also found with the deferred lifetime account, you can lock in your purchase price and then you can increase maximum commutations, which further reduces the asset value from, say, an early retiree at 60. For the first 7 years, you can almost run that balance to zero while the investment balance has barely moved and staying stable. So it can create significant increase the cash flow if planned early. Even in retirement, the biggest savings we've had is probably about $18,000 per year cash flow. So when a client comes in, if you can just show 3-4 years of an additional $10,000-$20,000, it's like 80 to 100 grand, almost a sure thing, not market linked as an external factor. And you've got to save that money. So it's a huge benefit on cash flow. And then that means it's just less capital from your own that's drawn down. So you get a lot of clients that it's relevant for. When clients have legacy, the unfortunate thing with the lifetime products, the legacy payout exit benefit is not favorable to the family or the estate. Yeah. So you've got to weigh up that. Client priority is at legacy. If it's purely legacy, you want everything to go to your children. You don't even want to spend it on yourself. The lifetime is probably not suitable. There's some big consequences around it with the death benefit payout, and that needs to be explained clearly and thoroughly with a client because you're wearing the risk. But there's a lot of clients who've had that wear the risk where it's a really good optimized benefit and they've understood it and they've been informed and they've gone into it full steam ahead. But it's not for everyone. Yeah, it's like with any case by case.
It's a great call out. I think what we've seen advisors doing is using, part and part. So you have allocations, and depending on that client's sensitivity around their, needs and gifting that they want to give versus their own income needs, depends on the allocations. But you're right, and that allocation will be anywhere between 0 to 100%, right, depending on the circumstance. But these kind of products have seen, I go back 5 years ago and about 1 in 20 advisors were using some kind of longevity solution for a very small part of their books. That number is now 1 in 4 advisors. So we've got a significant amount of advisors that have really taken this up and really trying to understand it. That's flowing through to occasional products at the moment, but clearly with a few other, I'll call them copycats, kind of tracing us, which is great to raise awareness and say, what can advisors do to help help Australians. That's kind of what we're all here for. It's a great thing to raise that awareness to say there are many things that we can do to help. And, yes, you do need to understand them and know when to use them and when not to for the right types of clients to add significantly more value on top of what you're already giving them.
Absolutely. I always sort of say, what's the exit strategy? You've got to understand your client's needs and what their goals are for what they're leaving behind with that in that decision-making process. So it isn't for everybody. I'm really happy that you brought that up, Kane, because we're thinking of during the retirement phase, but we've also got to consider the estate planning and the legacy they're leaving behind and the tax implications and all of those kind of things. There's so many factors, many moving parts, but if we're across it and we understand our clients' needs, and we're sort of going, this looks great, but what about down the road down here? What's that going to look like? And having that meaningful conversation with them, and they'll appreciate that, because there's been cases where clients have come to me and gone, I'm going to do this, I want to do this, I want to do this because so-and-so just told me, and I'm going, it's a flat no. And I have to give them a really good reason. I've got to be really caring about that. I can't just go like abruptly, absolutely not. I go, okay, let's hear you out. And then we have that conversation, but I've already got the million reasons why it is a no. They have no idea of why that's a no. So it's just about how we articulate that and educate the clients, as you said. And that brings me to another thing you said about the Centrelink that made me laugh. I have a client whose parents are just they're about to split, and she was telling me, Mum and Dad are going through a divorce. They're selling the house. Mum's going to move in with me. And I'm thinking, where is this going? Do they need help with their retirement planning, and are they downsizing? And she was like, no, they want nothing. They want to get Centrelink. And I was like, I nearly fell off my chair. Could you imagine? I was like, what? So yes, sometimes people want the money from the government to their own detriment. I'm sure you all have those stories.
Too common. I have clients go, show me the numbers, show me why, when will I get it? And sometimes in the modeling, it's like you'll get it at 84 years old when your capital's depleted a bit more. And yeah, they just want to fast track that and bring it forward. It's quite an interesting one.
It's interesting until they have to spend half a day with Centrelink on the phone.
Yeah.
Yeah. On a good day.
I can believe that we've been talking nonstop here, I think, 45 minutes almost. We will have to wrap this up, but I feel that there's been some great takeaways on reflection. I think, Hutch, you've brought some stuff to the table about.
I'll get lucky occasionally.
I guess, I think, what to consider with the portfolio, piece. And you've got, AMP has a great menu, but you've also got products that can be selected upon circumstances for the client. Kane, I loved your add to how you've utilized managed accounts versus the way I do manage portfolios. So I feel like we've all put our own 2 cents into this cash flow retirement chat.
Yeah, thanks. It's been a good chat. I think
it's valuable.
Yeah, very, very, very worthwhile conversation. It's just good to recognise there are many places to add value to Australians' retirement. We've got, as you alluded to, I think it's 2.5 million people retiring over the next 10 years. That is a significant amount of people to look after. There are many moving parts to understand what are the right levers to pull, to what extent. But, it is about that individualization that you guys all do well. My job is to try and help you do that efficiently as possible. There's good stuff we're doing in that space to come. But yeah, keep doing what you're doing to serve Australians. That's what I'm here for.
Fantastic.
Yeah. One more key takeaway from me to summarise. But if there's one thing I could say, if you do go down the managed account space, do it for the client benefit. Don't do it for business efficiencies. And that's a lot of the feedback in surveys of what's being pushed. It will save more time for the client. But it's a big part of client understanding and having, like you said, that bespoke control and relationship about how the money is managed. And with an off-the-shelf managed account, I felt personally, you don't have a lot of control of that. And that's why people might want to stay model portfolio too. It's just to make sure what's best for the client, not for business efficiencies. I think business efficiencies will be saved through AI on file notes and automations. Do it there. Don't do it in your portfolios. It's a core part of what we do. It's a big part of the longevity. Find your efficiencies in other areas. And if you can make it work and it feels right, get the right advice, get the expert support. Make sure you've got the right structure to run the portfolio that you think's best. That's
managed accounts are not for everyone, and there's many different ways to do it. But they work well for some. But again, you're spot on. We're all here to actually make clients' lives better. Let's focus on that first, and then run a good business off the back of it. But
well said, guys. Correct. Absolutely. And I'm married to someone who builds managed accounts, so there you go. And I don't.
Sorry.
No. That's this is precisely the point, right? I can have them. I've got them at my fingertips. If I want him to build one, that'd be great. But I know what's working for my clients and how I articulate the value. I understand it. It's a place I like to play. It works for everybody in terms of how the practice operates, and of course the outcome being the client. But you articulated it beautifully. It's about the client, and as you said, Hutch, that it's about helping as many Australians as we can through their retirement journey.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Good session. Thank you.
Thanks all.